Hello and welcome to the Iratus Complication, a Stargate Atlantis rewatch podcast. I am your host, Michael, along with my co-host, Grant.
That's me.
And today we are going to be talking about episodes 8 and 9 from Season 1. Episode 8 is Underground and Episode 9 is Home. Two single-word titles. Widely varying in excitement, from my end at least.
No, both were fantastic, personally.
They're good episodes, it's just I find episode 9 to be much more boring compared to episode 8.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's start off with episode 8, Underground. This episode introduces the Jedi, who are going to be a constant thorn in the side of Atlantis from now until...
They are the Jedi.
Oh, God.
This is getting out of hand. Now there are two of them.
Of them. It's a bad idea.
I'm sorry.
Anyway. So yes, this introduces the Jedi, the main human antagonist, I would say, in Atlantis.
Interesting.
They're going to be persistent throughout this series, so this is really important, a really important episode to watch.
See, now there was something familiar about them and their uniform, but it's interesting. I don't know the degree to which I recalled their significance. Now, when I saw Miles O'Brien from Next Generation, I was like, "Oh shit!" And then I was like, "That's right. It jogged in memory." But it's interesting going through this and not having seen it for many years, what I recall and what I don't.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where every once in a while you'll get like somebody shows up that you weren't expecting, who's famous for another sci-fi series or another thing.
Yes.
One of the common ones that keeps bugging me, and it's not like bugging in a bad way, is that Jonathan Frakes directs a couple of episodes pretty much regularly. And there's some of my favorite episodes. It's like, oh hey, it's
don't...
Riker.
Oh, wait, is that pronounced Fracas?
I don't know how you pronounce it. Frakes.
I thought it was Frakes. It
might be Frakes.
Okay, yeah, I have no idea.
I'm not. You know what? I'm just gonna leave in my mispronunciation, and people can yell at me in the comments.
Yes, please.
Drive that engagement.
Yeah, I was about to say, please, release your anger. Give us your engagement. I just can't get out of Star Wars today. This is an issue.
Yeah. Especially because a Star Trek character showed up.
Listen, if it's not clear to you, dear viewer, at this point, that we might enjoy sci-fi on occasion, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, I dabble.
Anyway. Why did I vision you swirling a wine glass and dabbing at the corner of your mouth with a handkerchief?
Anyway, so let's get into the events, right?
Yes.
So
First
it pretty
thing,
much starts off.
Well, hold on. I'll take it.
Go ahead.
I'll take it here. I just want to say the first bullet point I have here for episode 8 Underground is McKay eating. So first thing I wrote down.
Yes. We literally open up on McKay scarfing down some coffee and a sandwich.
Yeah, talking about how they're running out of coffee and presumably sandwiches.
Yeah. We learn that Atlantis is on the edge of rationing, and so they have to go and start finding trading partners. Mm-hmm. And the Jedi are name dropped in like the first 10 seconds by Taylor, who says that there are these known good fair traders, the Jedi. They're probably going to be amenable, and we can negotiate with them to secure more food for the Atlantis expedition.
Yes.
Weir's like, okay, fine. And then an important fact is that Taylor says we should go on foot, not in a jumper, which kind of becomes a later reveal to the Jedi.
That is true. Her saying that they're skittish and that would be the way to go. Like, the whole way the episode slowly goes with Jedi being like, oh, they have technology. Like, the episode would be 20 minutes if they showed up in a jumper, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, the episode is definitely just a series of reveals of what the Jedi are capable of and then what Atlantis is capable of. And it's basically both of these cultures learning that, oh, shit, we probably shouldn't underestimate either one. Right?
Yes. There's also, we'll get into this, there's a classic moment where, as always, Rodney McKay underestimates and is thus surprised by another culture. Whenever there's someone barely technological, like, that previous episode, where he's like scoffing at all their stuff, and he's like, "Whoa,
at the Hoffins, yeah,
and the drug," and he's like, You did what? There's the same thing here. Later, they have a very rudimentary CRT looking screen, but then they've been able to decode the encryption of the Wraith. And he's like,
Yeah.
you what now? Like, so he's always. Just, I don't think it's the last time we'll see it, and it certainly isn't the first.
So this episode is interesting compared to other episodes because there's essentially no B plot to this episode. It's straight A plot all the way through, and that A plot is here are these Janai people, let's try and get food from them is kind of the beginning of the A plot, and then that veers off course when they learn about what the Janai
it's
are.
a very fluid A plot, but it's still just one plot. You're right.
First, we meet the Janai villagers, and they're Amish, essentially. That's the aesthetic.
And they literally, the characters say that too.
Yeah. McKay remarks later on, before they discover the technologically advanced nature of the Janai, that he sees radioactive readings in Amish world. Yeah, they're simple farming people is what we are led to believe, right? They've got straw hats, they've got, rough linen. They go and they meet this guy Cowan, they start negotiating with him, and they're like, hey, we need all this food and we can give you medicine, because that seems to be like the one bargaining chip that like Atlantis loves using, because obviously it's not we're going to give you weapons, which comes up later, or we're gonna do this, that, or the other thing. It's like, hey, we've got penicillin.
Yeah,
these are really good drugs. Everybody else is living in caves, and we have the ability to fight off infections that will kill your people.
Right.
And that's kind of Atlantis's main bargaining chip for most of the series, I'd say.
Yeah.
Later on, we'll see them trade agricultural knowledge and stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, and it's a pretty contrast to this and Weir's reaction, which I'm sure you'll tell us about in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trading, it's a very safe thing to trade penicillin, right? And medical supplies. It's not really very fraught with ethical considerations.
It is a moral good no matter what.
Right. Yeah.
There's very little risk of it literally blowing up in your face.
Mm-hmm.
So then Cowan starts saying, well, I don't know, we'd have to clear out a whole bunch of extra land and stuff. And then Shepard goes, what if we could make clearing land easy? And Cowan's like, oh, so you can just uproot a 300-year-old stump then? And Shepard's like, yes. I am paraphrasing heavily here, but that's essentially what happens.
Yeah.
And Cowan's like, oh, do tell. So what does Shepard decide to do? He decides to blow up the stump with C4, which, I mean, okay, C4 is a little bit of an exaggeration, but that's literally how they clear stumps nowadays, is with explosives.
Yeah.
It's a quick way of doing it that doesn't require you, breaking metal tools trying to uproot a giant stump.
Yeah. It's hard work. And roots are a real... I when watching that episode, I was like, you know what, fair, because I have flashbacks to even small little trees in the backyard, like maybe 2 inches thick branch. It sucks getting the roots out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I don't blame them for that. One thing I wondered though, when they're bartering with the C4, I was constantly like, all right, guys, you have not had contact with Earth since coming here. How much? Now, you haven't used a lot of C4, but you're going to want to be holding some back, for this looming Wraith conflict. How are you going to, I was surprised Weir didn't bring that up. She was just like, well, we shouldn't be giving the weapons. What about the fact that, how much C4 could you have possibly come with?
I mean, they brought their own supercomputers, so...
That's true. I mean, it was, the first episode, there was a lot of unloading. It was clearly they brought a lot of supplies. I mean, they would. It's an expedition, a huge expedition.
There's also a little bit of, they've definitely been there for weeks, if not months at this point, and they haven't started rationing yet. They brought a lot of shit.
Yeah, that's true.
Is the gist
They're
of
only
it, right?
just running into food issues. That's fair. And they're not, using C4 every day. They barely use it at all. So.
And I mean, even for, I know clearing a stump, you'd need to use an amount, but you wouldn't need to use a whole brick.
Not even
of
a whole
C4.
brick. No. My God, that would be.
it's a powerful enough explosive.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So Cowan's like, that's interesting. And Shepard basically all but says, yeah, sure, medicine and the C4 for your Tava beans. Oh, by the way, the beans are called Tava beans. This comes up 3 other times in the series, the name of Tava beans. Anyway.
Man, they really wanted you to know.
Well, they really wanted the joke with Java beans.
Yes.
So you have Shepard basically all but offering C4 and the medicine for these beans, and goes back to Weir, and Weir's like, what now? We're becoming arms dealers, are we? And Shepard's like, well, I said I had to run it by you. And then Weir's like, yeah, to things you already agreed to.
And he was like, yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of development in the Shepard Weir kind of mini conflict in this episode. Anyway, so they decide, well, might as well kind of thing. So what happens is Shepard and McKay had left, and Taylor and Ford are still on the planet with the Janai, experiencing the wonderful Harvest Festival.
Yes.
And so on the way back, McKay and Shepard take a less conventional route because Shepard likes taking straight lines to places and not following the path.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, oh hey, there's radioactive readings in Amish world.
Yes.
And so they make a detour into this barn. There's a big pile of hay. They clear off the pile of hay, and what should be there but a giant metal hatch that, it is noted, has been recently oiled, so it's not like it's just some old.
I liked that. That was I thought that was a pleasing way to motivate. How do we know this isn't left behind, previous situation, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. He just like runs his hand over the hinge, and it's like, like, yeah, okay, checks out.
One of the things that doesn't make sense for me, because we'll find out that this is a secret Janai bunker, right? Mm-hmm. Is the thing is not freaking locked.
They literally say that too.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, well, if you just had locked your secret bunker,
yes,
we wouldn't be here. Yeah. And yes, you're an advanced civilization. Why didn't you lock this thing? Like, I know that you're like, yes, we tell them to stay on this path, and we are very cautious about people. But it's like, you don't trust people to begin with. Bullshit, you're just going to leave stuff just unlocked and out.
No, but you see, they lampshaded it by having McKay call it out, so it's fine, you see.
Yeah, fine. Anyway, so they go down, and then they get captured by some soldier types. And this is our first introduction to my favorite gun of the series, the lever-action 3-barrel rifle. Which is a ridiculous kind of gun that I would have sketched in a notebook when I was 15.
Yes.
In fact, I'm pretty sure I sketched something very similar, except I had them vertically stacked, not in a triangle configuration.
I think we all made an Uber shotgun at some point, right?
Yeah. So they get captured. They're sitting there, and then we go back to the Harvest Festival, and all of a sudden Callan gets called away, right? And we're thinking, oh, here's the A-B plot, right? We're going to have the surface-dwelling Janai, and then whoever's down in the bunkers, essentially, right? Which is a sci-fi trope, right? Going all the way back to, like, the Time Machine, right? Where in the future there were surface dwellers, and then there were subterraneans, right?
Yes. Yeah,
I think it was day and night, something like that. Anyway.
No, you're right. It was, yeah.
But yeah, this idea of two separate civilizations. And in fact, McKay even brings that up, that maybe they're two completely separate different cultures that don't know about each other or don't interact. And who should walk in but Cowan?
Yeah.
And it turns out they're exactly the same people. There is no B plot. Again, this is a full A plot episode.
They throw something out quickly that I did mention when we were watching about the history of the Janai. And they said that they were once spread among many worlds. And at the time I was like, oh, they were spacefaring? And so they had to, the Wraith, the culling maybe stepped them back technologically. And you rightfully and said, well, this being Stargate, they might have just, used gate travel and have spread. It's just the size of their population rather than the level of technology. And I was like, oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the ancients, it's kind of implied, were relatively permissive when it came to human development.
Yes.
Like, they just kind of, more human development was an interesting curiosity to the ancients. Mm-hmm. I guess you could call it. And we'll see some massive evidence of that in later seasons.
Interesting. Okay.
Sorry, there's just so much that, like, kind of the seeds of ideas get set up in this first season, which makes the first season really interesting, and then they really start exploring stuff as they're getting into the second and third and fourth seasons, and then the fifth season is mostly just tying a bow on everything. Anyway, so back to the story.
Yes.
So it turns out they're actually one civilization, and they quote unquote capture Taylor and Ford in a dramatic tension scene where they're like, what's happening kind of thing. Now we already know that they're all one Janai kind of thing.
Yeah, but they don't know that. And then all of a sudden they produced a gun.
Yeah, they have captured the team. And they're all sitting there, and Callan's explaining to them, we've got a plan against the Wraith, and we could really use your C4 kind of thing, and you're our prisoner.
And then McKay's like, oh, the nukes you're building? And everyone's like, what? And he's like, yeah, of course.
He's like, yeah, radiation readings are an interest of mine, and what else could it be? Obviously, you're making nuclear weapons. And of course, McKay explains, he's like, oh, yeah, no, you think the C4 can solve your supercriticality problem? And Cohen's like, will it? And McKay's like, it might. McKay plays this really coy because now he feels like he has all the information.
Yeah, suddenly just because he knows some stuff, he thinks he has all the chips when, like, still they're captured. Like, he's way too comfortable because he's, McKay.
So it turns out that Cowan sees this as an opportunity, starts taking them to go look at their nuke production facility, essentially.
Yes.
As it turns out, McKay both mentions two things that will constantly come up. One is that they really don't know how radiation works. I mean, we're talking like Marie Curie levels of understanding of radiation.
Yeah, there are like rods, what would appear to be the nuclear rods, just with glass in between them, like in the middle of the room.
Yeah, and Callan's just constantly like, our scientists assure us that this is safe. And McKay's like, no, it's not. Like, it would take days for it to really affect us. So, like, we're probably going to be all right. But he's like, I assume some of your people spend days or weeks down here. And Callan's like, some spend their entire lives. To which McKay retorts, they're short lives. We will later see in several different episodes that McKay is a little bit overly touchy about radiation. So again, there's probably an unusually high amount of cancer. I'm not saying that, the Janai don't suffer from the effects of radiation sickness, because they do. And again, it will be a plot point in future episodes way off in the future.
Interesting.
Well, it's a minor plot point. I don't want to make it out to be more than it is.
No, I just love the continuity that awaits us.
They look at the facility that they're enriching uranium and stuff, and McKay just starts spouting off information. McKay was probably, I'd say, 10 seconds away from just giving them the designs because he wants to seem smart.
Yes.
Like, it's McKay's fatal flaw that he always wants to be the smartest guy in the room and prove that he's the smartest guy in the room.
Right.
He starts spouting off all this stuff, and Shepard stops him. And he's like, what? And Shepard's like, I think the question, Cowan, is, are we allies or are we prisoners? Cowan's like, all right, you guys aren't prisoners anymore because we could really use you guys. If you can get our nuke program up and running, that's great. And they have a nice feast right in the underground bunker. And Cowan toasts them and all this stuff.
Yes, yeah, and at the feast, now, as opposed to the party under the guise of them being Amish and stuff, now they have, they bring out plates with what looks like pretty good food and forks and stuff. And McKay, of course, asks, do you think there's lemon in this? So they're continuing to establish his lemon allergy. Appears to be very powerful.
I mean, it's been, well, okay, McKay is a hypochondriac.
Yes.
B, that goes all the way back to the first episode he was in SG-1. Like, it's almost a throwaway line.
Wow. And
it comes up several times. He's always worried about lemon and citrus, and it's a semi-major plot point in one episode. We'll talk about it when we get there. But yeah, I mean, it's nice that one character quirk, like, the characters don't lose quirks in this series.
Yeah, they don't seem to forget things about characters.
There is very good continuity, and there is some stuff that I am sure is dropped, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's sometimes that stuff is dropped that needs to be dropped. Yeah, okay, that gets dropped, which, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that just, like, there's a lot of small stuff that they don't drop because it increases the characterization. But I'm sure there's probably some stuff that they do drop. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's a couple of things that they drop because it's like, yeah, we really don't need that,
Yeah.
That doesn't flesh out our characters as well as we thought it did in the moment. I don't find there to be any major plot holes in the series, which is nice.
Yeah.
And that might just be because there's a lot of hand waving that gets done and we're all just kind of cool with it. But I mean, that happens in every sci-fi series.
Yeah, it's sort of a necessary component.
Anyway, so back to the dinner. They get Cowan to describe what they were going to do, which is they're going to nuke the Wraith in their sleep.
Oopsie. And this is not, this is what, the second or third time that a race has said, well, since they're sleeping, they sleep for centuries sometimes, and then all of the away team just like looks at each other like, fuck.
Yeah, and Shepard and McKay kind of want to keep it a little secret, and Taylor's like, no, we have to tell them because,
and she's right.
you know, she's not wrong, but you know, she explains, it was a rescue mission and all this other stuff, and you know, now they're awakening, and Shepard's like, but they said they weren't in a rush, so we probably still have some time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that big of a deal.
And then Cameron's like, we had projected 5 years until the first one was ready. Do we have that much time?
No. It was 50 years.
What?
They weren't planning for it to be ready for another 50 years.
Was it
5 years for their first test?
Yes.
Test
yeah.
of a nuclear device.
Oh.
He wasn't expecting the Wraith to wake up for another 50 years, giving them plenty of time to get their tests done and all that.
Yeah, okay. Shit.
So he's like, do we have that much time? And Shepard's like, probably not.
Yes.
And then McKay, sensing that things are about to go downhill really quickly, is like, I can get your program right back on track. Hell, you know, he's kind of doing that typical McKay thing of like, I could do that in a weekend, right?
Right.
More accurately in 20 minutes, which is usually the amount of time he takes to solve an impossible problem.
20 minutes of runtime at least, you know.
So he's like, yeah, no, we can do that. All we need is, you know, access to enough refined material, and where do you want to put it, basically? You know, they're really impressed by this, and they're like, all right, fine. And then it's like, oh, how do you know this information, right? And that's where we get our fun CRT, weird old tech interfacing with new high tech. Like there's oscilloscopes and all this other stuff in this lab.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, so we downed a dart, and we got this flash drive from them. It's essentially what they're saying.
Well,
right?
they say this recording device, and then McKay literally calls it like a jump drive.
It's flash memory in a jump drive.
Yes. Which is
how he would know that from just looking at it. Don't ask me, because it's a funky looking alien prop.
Yeah.
But sure, let's go with it. Right? I'm not unwilling.
I thought they had found one before.
No.
We haven't seen that device yet.
This is the first one that we will see. We will see subsequent other ones later on.
Okay. Yeah, that was a memory of a previous viewing. Finally, I got one.
Yeah. So you know, it's like this device tells us where a hive ship is, and we think we can plug it into their computer core essentially and get the location of all the other hive ships. Mm-hmm. Which good plan, right? And of course, McKay is super surprised that they were actually able to like download information from it. And you know, how did they actually figure this out? They've got like 1950s, 1960s maybe level of technology.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where we always assume that there's this linear progression, right? You know, there's always a couple of different branches you could take to put your effort into. There's a bunch of different ways that things could happen. Like we could not have flat screens, but we could still have supercomputers. You know, like all of these things are conceivable to me.
Yeah. I'm not saying that it's impossible or that like technological advancement couldn't have happened in that manner. It's just anything that interfaces with Wraith tech. The Wraith tech is weird, like super weird.
Yeah.
Like does not interface with regular electronics normally, kind of weird. Because it's all bioorganic based, kind of.
Right.
Like it is in several times when Wraith code has to be dealt with. McKay is like, this is just weird.
Yeah.
Like it's not the same. And so interfacing with it just seems like weird. But obviously if you took all of your scientists and you were throwing your entire might behind for hundreds of years behind, okay, we need to decode this electronic thing, you know, and we need to build nukes. Yeah, I could see that happen. I am willing to allow this hand wavium. I just think that it's an interesting kind of leap.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, we had ENIAC when we were building the bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were on the cusp of digital computers. The idea for them has been around since, well, the 1800s when Babbage was talking about his analytical indifference engines. Right. And that was steampunk. That was with gears.
Mm-hmm. The first bug in a machine was a literal bug.
Yeah, but that was in that was named in the 60s, I want to say. So after we had started getting general computers in places, still the size of rooms, but
mm-hmm.
yeah. Any hoozles. They know where a Wraith ship is sleeping.
Yes.
And they want to go on a stealth mission to bomb it. And Shepard's like, no, let's not bomb it yet. Let's make sure this intel is accurate and they're still there. Mm-hmm. And then we can build your bomb and come back. But before he can do this, he has to go and talk to Weir.
Mm-hmm.
So He heads back to Atlantis and talks to Weir. And Weir's like, excuse me? Before, you guys were saying we're just going to give them C4, and now we're building fucking nuclear weapons?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah, we are. And I think it would have been interesting to bring up a little bit of Weir's backstory here. Now, they don't. But it's safe to assume that with her working as like a NATO UN negotiator, she's probably was, dealing with like SALT or SALT-like treaties, right? Strategic arms limitations, getting rid of nukes, the Iran deal, right? Those were all things that were happening during this era. So, or when Weir would have been active as a negotiator. She's probably really freaked out by this, right? And she is. She's like, I didn't expect that we'd be giving people nukes. C4 is one thing, but you're talking about nuclear weapons.
Yes.
And, it's like, well, they were going to build them anyway. And she's like, oh, well, if they were going to build them anyway. Major disagreement between her and Shepard over whether or not they should do this. And Shepard's like, listen, we have to do something. They're like the only people that we've come across that would be viable allies against the Wraith.
Right. And we still need the goddamn food.
Mm-hmm. And she's just like, all right, fine.
Yeah, she said. I wrote here. She says, "It's a classic." Weir says no until she doesn't.
Yeah.
And she does with like she does that. I talked about this last episode. I think she takes that moment. She pauses and then she says something very final and urgent. In this case, it was, okay, go. And it's like, do it now. I don't know. I really like that character, that element of her character. She takes things under review and she thinks about them. And once she reaches a decision, however hard it was for her to get there, there's a finality to it. She's secure in it. I just think that's right.
She's committed to it.
Yeah, she's committed to it. She makes a decision. It's like, okay, go. Not just fine. Okay, yes to it and do it now. Yeah, I just like that.
Now, something we hadn't talked about that happened a little bit before the talk with Weir is that Shepard had said, we can do this reconnaissance run because we have a spaceship that flies through space. And Cowan's like, really? He's like, yes. And so when Shepard returns, he returns in a cloaked puddle jumper and decloaks it in front of the Jedi, and they're all very, oh my god.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? As you would be for the first time you're seeing a ship that goes from invisible to visible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they all pile on board. There's Cowan and Tyrus, who are the two Jedi that
wait a minute. There's one moment just before this where McKay is working on the or maybe it's after this initial part. He's doing the work on the bomb, right? And Cowan comes in and says, "Oh, some thinly veiled vague threat, like, well, you better do this, otherwise
you better hope they get back with the ship."
Oh yeah, and then McKay does this classic, I'm a dead man, which is always enjoyable. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so Tyrus and Cowan are the two Jedi that are joining the team on this infiltration mission. They're all armed to the teeth and ready to go. They get in the puddle jumper and they go through the gate and they come out and they cloak and then they get to the hive. Okay, that's all pretty boring, pretty standard stuff. That's essentially mostly B-roll. We get to the hive. They pile out because they're going to try and find the computer core. They leave Ford back at the ship. They run through a room that is full of cocooned humans.
Yes.
This is the kind of first indication that we get that Wraith sometimes like preserves.
Yes, and Cowan is very upset, and all of our Atlantis folk are like, yeah, they're like,
no, actually, it's the other way around.
Well, on the initial viewing, Cowan's like, my God, and everyone else is very business as usual.
And then the Atlantis team brings up that maybe we should try and free these people, specifically Taylor.
Yes.
Cowan's like, nope. Focus on the mission. The mission is first.
Yeah, we don't have time for this.
Shepard's like, these could be your people. And Cowan's just like, no, gotta go.
Yeah.
And Taylor's like, no, we need to help these people. And so Shepard's like, all right, Taylor, see what you can do here. We're going to continue on with the mission. Tyrus decides that he needs to keep an eye on Taylor, right? Because, again, the Jedi still do not trust the Atlantis members. So they go off and do their thing, and we're following the main team with Cowan. So Shepard, McKay, and Cowan. They get to this door, and then they McKay slices open a wall and sticks an electrode in there and manages to get the door open, right? So now we know that when they're on Wraith vessels from here on out, they can open doors, they can interface with the technology.
Right.
just like how we've seen them interface with ancient technology and open doors using the crystals and all that. Anyway, they get to the computer core, they download the data. We switch over to Taylor and Tyrus, and they're going through seeing if there is anybody alive in the cocoons. Which, I mean, it's a resting wraith hive, so the amount of people who are probably alive in those cocoons is relatively minimal because it's a skeleton crew, right? And they find somebody who's alive. And the alive person kind of bursts out of the cocoon, very horror movie, but it's not really a jump scare, you know?
Yeah, it's not. There was no tension put up for it to be a jump scare. It's just like, oh shit, it's just surprising you.
And the guy's like, help me, get me out of here. And Taylor's like, we need to get him out of here. And Tyrus is like, no, and pushes Taylor back and is like keeping Taylor from getting this guy out. And the guy is like, help me.
Not incorrectly, Tyrus maintains, if we do anything, they will know we've been here, and they cannot know we've been here. This is closest to my world, this ship. If we do anything, they'll come after us.
And the thing is that Tyrus then decides to go from being a voice of reason to a freaking idiot. And he's like, he shouts, shut up at the guy who's in the cocoon and then shoots him.
Yeah, which is when he loses all credibility. It's like, what the fuck? That was way louder than the guy screaming. You just discharged your firearm.
Yeah, so...
And not even one shot. Then, it was like a 2 or 3 second burst.
It's a burst.
Yeah. I was like, what the...
And so who comes around the corner but a Wraith guard? And it's like, oh no. And then Tyrus gets instantly stunned and Taylor managed to get away, but Tyrus is left behind. Anyway, so they all reconvene back at the ship, minus Tyrus. They get into the ship and they're like, we gotta go now.
Yeah.
Right? And Cowan's like, where's Tyrus? And Taylor's like, he got captured. And Cowan's like, well, he may have just been stunned. And it's like, nope, we're going.
Yeah.
So they pack up and they leave. So Tyrus is dead. Essentially,
he's probably getting fed.
Sure,
right
he
now.
was stunned in the scene, but Tyrus is dead. Right? There's no way he's living. And so they get back. They land back at the Janai planet. They get out, and Cowan's like, you shouldn't have done that, yada, yada, yada. And oh my God, there's an ambush. All these Janai military members come out, and they surround the team. And Cowan has the device in his hand, and he's like gesturing with it, and very much like, we're going to take your ship. And thanks for the information. And, you know, basically like, and we're going to make McKay build us the bombs because we have all of the cards, right? And Shepard's on edge. Don't take it as he's completely calm, but he's a lot calmer than you would expect. Because normally in situations like this, he's got his weapon like aimed at somebody, right? And it's just kind of it's in a low ready position. If I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, initially when they all come out of the woods, the whole Atlantis team, you know, readies it, shoulders their weapons, and is aiming it at them. But he does seem to drop it, I think.
And Cowan's like, this is what's going to happen. And then Shepard's like, I don't think so. I think you're going to let us go. And then Cowan's like, we have all of the cards. So what does Shepard do? He hits his radio and says, Jumper 2, Jumper 3, execute. And they decloak. And there are now 2 jumpers in the air with drones aimed at all of the Janai. Now, the tables have turned. And Cowan's like, what? Because Shepard had previously said they only had one spaceship.
Right.
I mean, they both lied to each other. Essentially, you know, the Janai and Atlantis never really got off on the right foot to begin with.
Yeah, there was a lot of deception the whole time. So.
And Shepard just goes, what? You didn't actually think we only had one of these, did you?
Right.
And so to add insult to injury, Shepard is like takes the data device out of Cowan's hands and says, you know what? For this, we should actually get something. And, you know, tucks it away. So now they have the data recorder and they leave the Janai planet and go back to Atlantis.
Yes.
And then we're informed that we, with our advanced technology and access to the ancient database and all that, have managed to locate 60 ships. 60 hive
21
ships.
In their quadrant. 60 or more total.
Weir notes that, like, so there are too many to nuke anyway.
Yes,
right?
He says
it would just be absolutely impossible.
Yeah, their whole stowaway, steal aboard a wraith ship, nuke it. There's just too many. There's just way too many.
And we find out that everybody's favorite, Sergeant Bates, managed to secure food from another planet. It turns out they did find a trading partner. So that at least allowed, I think that line is important because it allows it to not be that every mission has to now be trying to get food, right?
Yeah.
It resolves the initial conflict that brought them to the Janai without actually being the Janai the ones that solve that conflict. So we can continue on and assume that the base is well stocked with food. We don't have to worry about rationing and anything else.
Right.
But out of this episode, we get the Janai as a enemy of Atlantis, our first human enemy of Atlantis.
Damn.
Which gives a nice level of dynamic and allows for a lot of interesting things that we'll see coming up, especially with the next two episodes we're going to talk about next time, which directly involve the Janai and is a very good two-parter.
I'm excited for that. I will also say it's interesting from like from a writing perspective and from like a buy-in suspension of disbelief perspective. Them like suddenly putting that bow on it at the end, like, oh, by the way, someone else found food, might have been like a little easy, but having Bates do it somehow by like increasing the unlikelihood of it, like being like, really, Bates did it? It sort of lends more credence to it. Inversely to what you would expect. It's like, yes, this was unlikely, and it's even more unlikely that the asshole secured a trading partner. The militaristic guy did a big diplomacy, and got this. So by making it even more unlikely, somehow it just makes it more palatable. This is why they didn't think that they would find a trading partner, is because their Janai was their best bet, and they sent Bates, presumably after another potential trading partner that they didn't even think would happen, much less happen with Bates, and then it did. That's the subtext there. So I just think it's interesting that, a little bow at the end, but it's one that you buy.
That is episode 8, Underground. Let's move on to the second episode that we're going to cover in this particular episode of the podcast, which is episode 9, Home, which I maintain is one of the more boring ones after you've watched it once or twice.
Okay, well, it would be the 7th for you, I believe you said. So
yes, it's some ridiculous
very
number.
Few, for the record, episodes or indeed franchises would hold up for that many viewings. So I will say that much. For it being overall my third, but again, this was one of those situations where I might as well have never seen it before because my recall was 0. I thought it was a pretty fun Something's Not Right Here episodes, which I think is sort of the Stargate franchise as a whole has a penchant for this. I mean, I'm on season 3, I believe, of SG-1, and my watch through that I'm doing separate from this, and we've encountered already several of those episodes like that. The wait a minute, something's not right here episodes.
Yeah, like the Gamekeeper episode.
Yes. That guy's so great.
Where they're in VR.
Yeah. The Comtria episode. And
that's wonderful.
The Comtria. Yeah, he does such a good job. And then, of course, the Goa'uld, various Goa'uld deceptions. Yeah. Not to get, on the off chance that, again, you are an absolute freak and you're watching Atlantis without having seen up to the appropriate point in SG-1. We will endeavor not to spoil it for you, you weirdo, you miscreant. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So the plot of this is relatively simple, so I just want to go over it in short order, and then we can talk about all the details we thought were interesting. How does that sound?
Yes.
Okay, so the plot is pretty simple. It's straightforward. There's technically 3 or 4 different thread plots. So you could say that there's an A plot, a B plot, a C plot, a D plot, but it's really just one big A plot, another single plot episode. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
The main thrust of the plot is that they go to this planet. It's got all this mist around the gate, and oh my god, McKay figures out that it's an energy field. And in fact, it's such a big energy field that what they can do is they can take the special control crystal from the Atlantis gate that allows an 8 chevron lock, put it in this gate's DHD, and be able to dial Earth using the energy of the mist to draw enough energy so that they can make a wormhole to Earth and they can go to Earth.
Yes.
Okay, that's the basic start of the plot.
They're a little concerned that when getting there, they might not come back, so they ask for volunteers. Hey, who among you might be willing to go, even if it could be a one-way ticket, or at least you might be on Earth for a very long time before being able to return. Blah, 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 blah. People, the cast goes through, well, I'd like to go home, but God, I really want to come back here. This is my purpose, yada, 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 stuff like that.
Yeah, everybody's essentially like, oh, I could go, but I don't want to go, but you could go if you wanted to. It's a lot of hemming and hawing. Anyway, McKay manages to install the crystal in that DHD. They do the 8 chevron lock, and we hear the voice of Walter Harrigan answering Dr. We're Back. Everybody loves Walter.
Yes, he's the best.
And so, okay, cool, All right, hey, they get to go back to Earth, right? Big plot development, if
huge.
True.
Yeah.
They mentioned that the Prometheus is being equipped by the Asgard with intergalactic thrusters, essentially. So if they step through, they can be back inside of a month, right? So it makes it believable that all of them would go, and what we see is all of them going, right?
Yeah.
We see all of them on Earth, I should say. We don't actually see them walk through the gate.
Right. It starts. We'll get into the nitty gritty later, but the first thing we see is the camera just frames Weir on the ramp, just in front of the Stargate in the Cheyenne Mountain complex, and we're like, okay, Weir has gone through. And then throughout the episode, everybody else is there, and we're like, oh, okay, they're all there. They're all there.
And we, there's General Hammond saying hello. We'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we get the everybody's enjoying their time back home and everything seems great and wonderful and yada yada yada, and then stuff seems not quite right. It's not quite there. And then Shepard really is the first one to kind of ping that it feels weird scenario, and then describes the fact that 2 of the people who've shown up at his bachelor pad party are dead.
Yes.
Right? And we get a confirmation of things aren't just a little bit odd, but completely wrong. Like McKay is doing some experiments and is like, this says that the laws of physics don't exist.
Yeah, he's doing some readouts on the CPM, and the numbers that he's getting back from it are not only saying that it's dead, they're saying things that cannot be true.
There's a lot of stuff where for Weir, interpersonal relationships and stuff, Ford is there, but he's kind of dropped really quickly, where it's like, oh, I got transferred back to Antarctica. That sucks. And then we don't see Rainbow Sun Franks ever again.
Yeah, true. Well, he shows up, a fake version of him shows up in
Shepard's scenes. Anyway, so yeah, it turns out that they're not actually in reality. They're all in separate fragmented realities built from their brains. Classic, essentially VR episode from Stargate. Yeah. And the thing that's controlling these realities is the mist. It turns out the mist is actually people.
It's people. It's sentient.
Very Stephen King kind of twist. And the mist is choosing General Hammond as kind of the voice.
Yeah.
To talk to them, and is like, yeah, so essentially you're unconscious on the planet. You aren't aware of, you never step through, right? We couldn't let you because every time the gate activates, hundreds of our people die, right?
Yeah.
And if you were to activate an 8 chevron lock, the amount of energy that would use would kill millions of us. It would be a literal holocaust. We can't allow that to happen, so we knocked you out, right?
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And of course, McKay then goes, wait a minute. You mean we're just sitting there? So what about food and water? And food.
Yes, he does. He says, we need food, we need water. I mean, we need food.
Yeah.
Of course.
General Hammond's like, we can't allow you to wake up because you might do that. And Shepard's like, no, read our minds. You know that now that we know that you're a sentient race, we're not going to do that. We would never do that. Yeah. Right. And they scan their brains and are like, all right, fine. They let him go. And then they wake up. And of course, McKay is the first one to be like, what if it's a fake out?
Yeah.
What if we're actually, not conscious and we're still in our fake realities?
Disembodied voice.
And yeah, disembodied voice of George Hammond being like, nope, you're good. We're good. Just,
this is your reality. You have my word. And then Rodney says, well, I'm starving, so this must be real.
Yeah. There's the short mention by McKay that what if we want to pull our own double fake out? And then basically Shepard's like, no, we're not doing that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, go ahead and get the special crystal out and we can go back. And as we are zooming out of the planet and fading to black, McKay is presumably starting to work on the DHD. That's the entire episode.
Yeah.
It's character development in a way because it's how all these characters would deal with essentially what their idealized life would be. We get a little bit of that implication like with O'Neill in SG-1 that Shepard is really good at defending against mental manipulation.
Yeah.
Right? And kind of can bend it to his will.
Yeah, because it's revealed that everything that happens in his reality, his bachelor pad, his awesome house with like remote control helicopter and stuff everywhere, and Taylor remarks, this is a lot of space for one person. And he like plays it close to his chest because he's still trying to figure out what's going on. And he's like, yeah, a man needs a place to spread out. But it's all an invention. It's a fantasy he had that the thing read as real. This house has never existed. It's just a place he would like to live. And you get to see that part of him. There's a big Johnny Cash poster. There's the remote control helicopter.
That Johnny Cash poster will come back later.
No way. The continuity
We
of
are
this
we
show.
are we are gonna see it later on when Shepard gets a few more personal effects and we see his essentially dorm room.
Nice. So yeah, it's fun, and it's also interesting that we get a lot of Shepard because we get both an idealized version of what his life would be on Earth, and we get the fact that he knows way earlier than everybody else because of the way that this illusory world is interacting with his very powerful imagination. It seems an ability to bend it to what he wants. He has suspicions early on, but he knows outright long before anyone else, and he just goes with it. He plays along to gather data until he finally is like, all right, I can't do this anymore, right? That's an
Yeah.
interesting choice.
We also get more characterization of Shepard than the others. So McKay's characterization is pretty much what we expect from McKay, right? You know, he watches The Outer Limits in his underwear.
Yeah, and
right?
eats fries that have been on the
Ooh.
couch for however many months they've been gone.
Yeah, and he has no messages on his recorder.
Yeah, and then he checks his voicemail, and it's like you have 0 messages. He's like, oh, must have been a power outage or something.
Yeah, it's like, no, McKay, no one wants to talk to
Because
you.
you're
That's
an
the reason
asshole.
why. In his own fantasy, right?
It's true.
In his own fantasy, nobody
it's
calls
not as
him.
much pure fantasy for everyone else.
Considering that his neighbor opens the door and is like, "Hey, do you want to go out?"
That's
with me?
true. That's true. But it's important. Yeah, but it's important to note that that they say that no one else has the power to make it as much a fantasy as Shepard. But yes.
So we get a lot. You know, we hear about certain things that have happened in Shepard's military career. You know, how his buddies died, that sort of stuff. So there's a lot more characterization for Shepard in this episode. And like I said, Ford gets like no screen time.
Yeah. That's a bummer.
Yeah, real Ford is there for a little while and then just gone. Ford will eventually, spoiler alert, just kind of disappear from the series later.
Oh damn.
Because he gets, I don't want to say, he effectively gets replaced by Ronan Dex.
Oh shit.
And not that I don't like Ford, but if that's what we had to sacrifice to get Jason Momoa,
Yeah.
that's what we had to
Jason
sacrifice to
Momoa,
get Jason
the first
Momoa.
time I ever saw him. Was a fan right out of the gate. Yeah.
There's not much going on in this episode.
Well, it in terms of how it fits into the greater narrative, of course, no, true. And it's a classic Stargate, like I said, something's not wrong here episode. But I will say, with essentially fresh eyes, it was enjoyable to watch. I don't feel like it really dragged. Maybe some of the very like casual romantic stuff between Weir and her husband, but I was like roped into that whole interaction, and you know, seeing how the characters reacted was enough for me, and the mystery of it. I like initially, you might have noticed, I totally bought that they were going home. I was telling you because you had said that this one was kind of boring.
It was so hard because there's a lot of little details that I wanted to point out.
Yeah.
And I will point those out once you're done.
Yes.
But
yeah, no, that was I totally bought it. I completely bought it. I was like, oh, bitch, and I can't believe they're going home this early, relatively, you know, first season, and you know, there's a mist around that has a lot of energy to it. Sure, totally. And then only Weir went through. Like they framed it so it was just weird, and then it was like, "Oh fuck, everyone's there." Well, that's funny.
well, yeah, but you can buy into that because you could see General Hammond saying hi to Weir, and Weir being the last one through.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And then
And the fact that when they're debriefing Weir, you only see Weir and McKay, but you only see one side of the conference table.
yes, and there's false versions of the others in their fantasies, so they make it all work. I just totally bought it, and I was like, "What are you talking? How is this? How is this not huge? They're back on Earth." And you were like, "Yeah, well." You
Yeah,
didn't say
well.
anything. You totally let me. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I had no idea until someone just did that classic long, slow look at something. It was before we were kissing her husband and being like, you know, we get the sense that that wasn't right. It was before even Shepard was like, something's not right here. It was, I don't remember what it was, where I was like, okay, it's all fake. But I didn't know they were all separate.
There are massive hints in there. If you pay, you have to pay very, very close attention. It is very easy on a first watching to go through with a lot of inattentional blindness, right? So the biggest thing that lets you know that Shepard is in a different reality from McKay and Weir is how General Hammond is dressed. In Shepard's reality, General Hammond does not wear his jacket because Shepard knows General Hammond.
Yes.
And Shepard knows that General Hammond doesn't wear that jacket all the time. Those are his dress wear.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? But in Weir has almost exclusively seen General Hammond in dress wear because she was a negotiator, right?
Yeah.
That's how she would see a general.
Now, this is interesting because it also establishes that this won't ever come up again, but different of these entities are handling them each separately. So it's maybe not necessarily a hive mind.
It could be the same central entity.
Well, but then it would know.
They do say that there are different people.
Yeah.
They built it based on each person's mind.
Right, but if they could draw from all of them, they wouldn't have a mistake like that. If they drew from all of them and were doing it centrally, like building a full picture of everyone, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Just sort of interesting.
Anyway, so there are subtle hints of things that are weird.
Tell me all.
Here's the thing that you don't realize until your fifth watch through of this very boring episode is that General Hammond in this is a 2-star general. Makes sense. He was a 2-star general during most of SG-1. When they leave for Atlantis, General Hammond's not in control of the SGC. It's General O'Neill in charge of the SGC. Why the hell would Hammond be there on short notice? He's head of homeworld security at this point in SG-1.
Oh, shit.
The fact that Hammond's there is odd. But if you've watched all of SG-1 before this, you don't think it's odd because you're just used to Hammond being in the SGC. But at this point, it's firmly in O'Neill's grasp.
Yeah, General O'Neill. That's right. Fuck. So
why isn't O'Neill there? Now, that might have been scheduling conflicts with Richard Dean Anderson. You know, he had stepped back his role on SG-1 by this point. So I'm not blaming them for not using that. But that's also another subtle hint that, hey, things aren't really all there.
Yeah.
And it's just the subtle differences, and they get more pronounced, like, finally, to show you that different people have different images of the other members is like, when Weir is talking to fake Rodney, Rodney's wearing a lab coat and his blue shirt.
Yes, they do a good job of placing the different... Once it's revealed to you, they do a good job of helping the audience follow along.
Yeah, real Rodney is just wearing like a polo.
Yeah, just
right?
a button-up. Yeah.
And fake Weir, who's talking to Rodney, which happens at almost exactly the same time, or at least that's what we're given the impression, is that they learn at pretty much the same time. Fake Weir is wearing a nice formal, coat and all that. And
business attire.
It's just interesting.
Yeah, I also wanted to call out, particularly, they use it various places, but particularly in the scene with Weir and McKay. When, there's the way they're dressed, but there's a bit of a little audio cue combined with the camera does a sort of whip pan. But it's very aggressive and it's blurred, right? To just further communicate to the audience, to make it seamless and be like, oh, reality swap, and it goes like whoosh, right? And I just appreciated that as a little thing, just to... I didn't feel like it was too much. I didn't feel like they were disrespecting the intelligence of the audience. I just thought it was a nice little additive effect.
Yeah. While I say that it's a boring episode, the main reason I say that is because what happens in Home does not affect anything going forward.
Well, it's all false, yeah.
Well, no, not just that it's all false. It's like there's a little bit of character building, mainly for Shepard, but other than that, and the small thing at the beginning where they're like, oh, the Atlantis DHD is special, which they will mention in other episodes.
Right.
This episode does not link into any other episode. It's very much like it's a filler episode. It's almost a clip show. Okay. All of the stuff that they were doing is sets they already have. They didn't really have to build new sets.
Yeah.
And it's setting up for the 2-parter that's about to happen. That's what it feels like to me. Just like how at the end of every season of SG-1 and Atlantis and to an extent Universe, I haven't watched all the way through Universe because I can't get through it.
Yeah.
But they always have a clip show towards the end so that they can do something big and huge for the finale and then the start of the next season, right? It's kind of a cost-saving procedure. Where that's what it feels like. That is completely unconfirmed. That is my suspicion.
I feel like it's that, and also when these things were coming out, there was no on-demand. And as a long-running show, because all the clip shows are recap episodes. I mean,
yeah, you want to bring all the threads together before you do.
Yeah, I feel like that was definitely consideration at that time, television at that time as well.
But yeah, the next 2 episodes are action-packed and just it feels like a season finale, but it's in the middle of the season.
Nice.
And it's big production values. We go to parts of the city that we don't see before, so they had to make new sets, and there's a lot of CGI, and there's a spectacular effect at the end of that. at the end of
Teasing
the second episode. So that's episode 9. I find it relatively boring. The first time it's interesting. The second time you start picking up on the subtle little hints. But after that, there's really no value for the episode.
Yeah.
Unless you have any other parting thoughts, that pretty much wraps up this episode. Next time, we are going to talk about season 1, episode 10, The Storm, and season 1, episode 11, The Eye. And I cannot wait to go over those episodes because they are episodes that I am willing to watch over and over and over again. And I never skip on a rewatching. Even if I'm only watching a couple episodes, it's either going to be that or a couple Ronan Dex episodes.
Wow.
They're a very good two-parter that I love. I will be honest. It's a lot of things come to a head. Characters that will come back are introduced. It gives us a good feeling and a good characterization of a lot of different people. So I'm excited for the next episode.
And those titles now sound familiar. I think I know bits and pieces of this. I think they were significant enough that I might remember Swath.
If you obviously like the podcast, give us a like, rate us 5 stars if we're on a podcast app. I think we've decided that we're going to start with YouTube, maybe end up
so then like, comment, and subscribe, and
official.
Don't forget to hit that bell.
Yeah, what Grant said. And I guess we will see you next time on the Iratus Complication.